Number 10. Ye Olde Snapchat. Here we have a painting of a woman in the nude, relaxing yet confident and expressing her femininity. Painted by Francisco de Goya in 1790, it was privately commissioned and was never meant for public viewing. Alas, here I am talking about it on the internet. The woman depicted in this painting is supposedly based on de Goya's mistress. Realist style painters often use nudity from their own lives. They came from lower classes, prostitutes, actresses, and in this case, lovers. I was going to make a joke about side chicks and nudes, but in all honesty, the paintings are well done, and I know I could never paint like that. This is a serious talent. My art projects were interesting to say the least. But maybe someone could paint me like that?
At number 9, Easter Procession in a Village. For many years, religion influenced much of the art world. Many of the most famous pieces were some kind of depiction of a religious figure or religious event, and though some artists followed the unspoken rule of keeping these holy pieces family friendly, others didn't, and it caused some tension. Vasily Perova's painting Easter Procession in a Village from 1861 was one of those paintings that faced some backlash for the content of the piece, not necessarily because it was NSFW, but because of how people were depicted in the painting. This artist was known to paint the common folk rather than people of high status like other artists at the time. In his Easter piece, he portrayed a celebration of the religious holiday, however people were upset and felt disrespected by the activities that the subjects in the painting were taking part in. There were images of people in a drunken state, and it even showed a priest being crushed under the foot of a peasant, which was a huge no-no in the eyes of a lot of people. The artist was accused of immorality, but the piece still went on to gain fame.
Number 8. The Awakening. The Birth of Venus. I could come out here and tell you guys that I'm a refined gentleman, a curator of the fine arts, in search of higher culture and the expression of true artistry. But the truth is, I watch way too much reality TV for that to come anywhere close. But the closest we as a species can get to perfection, according to some highly educated art people that are way smarter than me, is Sandro Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. Probably the or one of the most famous paintings ever to come out of the Renaissance. Completed sometime in the 1480s and commissioned by the Medici family, this naked lady's got some history. She represents the new revival, the Renaissance, in all her tall standing beauty. However, this painting may not be for a younger audience, as she is naked and her bosom exposed. Also, there's not much coverage downstairs as her lady bits are close to being exposed. But still, a really historical painting.
At number 7, Christ in the Desert. So many artists over the years have created their own depictions of Jesus Christ in different settings. Most of the time, Jesus is shown to be looking like a ray of hope for people in the holiest of settings, often performing miracles or just being a savior. But in Ivan Kremovsky's painting Christ in the Desert, the artist takes a very different approach to his depiction of Jesus Christ, and it got him a lot of scrutiny. In this piece, Jesus is seen sitting on a rock in the desert as part of his temptation by the devil in his 40-day fast after being baptized, but he is seen in a more human way, so to speak. Jesus looks tired with his hands clasped in front of him, almost giving a sense of hopelessness to the piece. People were shocked by the artist's portrayal of Jesus' suffering in the desert and called the piece blasphemous, saying that the artist desecrated something sacred by creating this painting. Though this was seen as controversial at the time, this piece became one of the artist's most famous and most powerful pieces of his career.
Number 6. Love Trumps All. We have seen a ton of ladies here. Turns out people really like to paint naked ladies. Almost as if people like art or something like that. But today we're switching it up a little and throwing some male nudity in the pot. This lovely painting was painted in a short time frame, 1602 to 1603. Depicted in a more Vincent omnia is Cupid in his boyish charm, trampling over musical instruments with a general feeling that love trumps all. And while I cannot deny that I love hugs and chocolate chip cookies from my mother, this painting shows a little bit more than just love. Cupid is posed in a way that reveals his piche deal, his John Hancock, his chief of staff, his trouser snake, his German army helmet, his manhood. I think you guys get the point. All jokes aside, this painting became quite popular after it was finished, inspiring other artists in writing about such a magnificent piece of art.
At number 5, Erased de Kooning. Imagine working so hard on something just for someone to erase it and pawn it off as their own. Well, this is what caused a pretty big scandal in the art world between American artist Robert Rosenberg and Dutch-American artist de Kooning. In 1953, de Kooning was a legend in the art world, and Rosenberg asked asked him if he could have one of his artworks. At first, he was hesitant to give it up, but eventually de Kooning gave up one of his pieces. I'm sure he certainly regretted that decision after seeing what Rauschenberg did to it afterwards. A few months after owning the de Kooning piece, Rauschenberg erased it and called it his own. Yes, he erased the whole thing until the canvas was blank and then published it as his own piece. First of all, it wasn't a very nice thing to do to another artist's hard work, but on top of that, it had people questioning whether this was even art. I mean, the canvas was literally blank. According to Rauschenberg, his intention with all of this was to, quote, attack abstract expressionism and give artistic value to the destruction of one of its artworks.
Number 4. The Garden of Earthly Delights. Nudity as far as the eye can see. Sometimes in movies and TV, a little bit of nudity pops up. It happens. Sometimes you end up watching movies with family, and you had no idea that that was going to happen. Who's blushing? Are you blushing? I'm not blushing. I'm looking at you, Game of Thrones. Well, what's more scandalous than one person displaying nudity? How about a whole bunch of people displaying nudity? Said Hieronymus Bosch as he painted this art between the years of 1490 and 1510. It depicts both men and women of various degrees of nudity frolicking and playing in what's either the best Where's Waldo find or where Paul McCartney writes his music. Some sort of fantasy land. With such a busy painting, a lot can be interpreted. Some say it supports creation ideals, the 7 deadly sins, or perhaps a warning of being too sinful. In my opinion, it kinda looks like a water park with a Renaissance lazy river, but the style of triptych is pretty cool.
At number 3, Yo Mama's Last Supper. Many artists use their artwork to speak on certain injustices, discrimination, and political controversies. This is a theme that we often see in today's modern art. Sometimes people can see it as powerful, and other times it results in backlash. In Renee Cox's piece, Yo Mama's Last Supper, we saw the artist use her artistic voice to speak on the portrayal of religious figures in art and how they're often portrayed as white. In this piece, she reimagined The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci by including black men and women in the piece. She painted Jesus and Judas as black women, and the rest of the disciples were black men. To her, this was a comment on the lack of racial and gender representation in Catholicism, despite the fact that there are many black Catholics in the world. It is a powerful piece, but that doesn't mean that everyone's going to like it. New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani called the piece anti-Catholic and accused it of, quote, attacking people's ethnicity, end quote.
Number 2. The Dream of the Fisherman's Wife. Not safe for life. Alright, when I saw this one, I thought I was being pranked. I didn't believe it. I thought there was no way. Oh my high friends, if there's a will, there's a way. Sorry about this one, editors, really. The Dream of the Fisherman's Wife was an Edo period Japanese print completed in 1814 by the most interesting Hokusai. I wouldn't recommend searching this one up at work. And I'm gonna be frank, you can use your imagination to fill in the rest, but the painting depicts a woman who is a big fan of calamari. So much so that she's having what daytime soap operas would call an affair with said 8-armed nautical beast. And loving it. I don't know if this makes you blush, hate sea creatures, or scream and run away, but it's a thing. Japanese art and culture were more open than most as they explored a lot of different ideas through the years. Eroticism was just one of those ideas. I'm sure this had no influence on a similar tentacle media we know and some love today. Maybe we should do the top 10 most attractive sea creatures by how many limbs they have. Hey King Crab, how you doing?
And finally, at number 1, the guitar lesson. Following that piece of NSFW work, I'm here to bring you another pretty scandalous piece. The painting, The Guitar Lesson by Balthus, is disturbing to say the least. I mean, it's raunchy, but it's also kinda effed up. The painting depicts a music teacher and his student who are totally not practicing any instruments. In the piece, you can actually see the guitar on the floor, and rather than having fingers on strings, there are fingers in other places. This caused quite a stir in the art world because of how inappropriate the content of this piece was, and it was so controversial that people have been refusing to display it since the 1970s. Now, I can't really speak too much on this piece because it's not exactly safe for YouTube, but if you really want to see this piece uncensored and read more about the controversy, then I recommend you hit up Google. I'd love to say more on this, but the gods of YouTube might smite me down if I do. At number 10, Olympia. In more modern times, our art has changed drastically. These days, some of the most provocative pieces gain the most notoriety and are highly praised, but back in the day, things were a lot different, and revealing pieces were often quite controversial. Showing things like nudity and gore were highly criticized, and many of these pieces caused mild uproar. This is the case with the painting titled Olympia by Edouard Manet. This piece features a nude model being presented flowers by a servant. What caused so much controversy about this piece was not only the nudity, but also its context, so to speak. At the time when this painting was created, when viewers saw artwork featuring a nude woman, the subject was usually depicted in a more passive way. But with the Olympia piece, the woman is looking straight at the viewer, and it made audiences a little uncomfortable. On top of that, it was also believed that the woman depicted in the painting was a lady of the night. This was widely thought because the name Olympia, the name of the piece, was often associated with women of this profession. As well, the painting looked to be set in a boudoir, which also backs up the suggestion of this woman's profession. What people found to be most scandalous was the fact that this woman in the image was modeled after a real person and not just a figment of the artist's imagination. At number 9, Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe. As I mentioned previously, the presence of nudity in paintings was often pretty controversial back in the day, and we will see this quite a lot throughout this video. Depending on the context of the painting and its subject matter, some pieces can cause audiences to see it as too provocative. Another one of these paintings that faced backlash due to its subject matter is the piece Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe by Edouard Manet. Yeah, the same guy who painted Olympia. In this painting, it features a naked woman surrounded by fully clothed men. This caused a scandal in the art world, and even when the painting was unveiled, it wasn't allowed to make its debut at the Salon in Paris because it was rejected and was instead exhibited at the Salon des Refusés. Even the style of this painting caused some controversy because of the stark contrast of light and dark in the painting, as it went against the style of art at this time. Before we carry on talking about more paintings that caused some uproar, why not take a moment to leave a like on this video if you're enjoying it so far, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel to see more videos like this one. At number 8, The Last Judgment. If you would believe it, even the most famous painter Michelangelo faced controversy for his painting of The Last Judgment. This is the painting that covers the altar wall in the Sistine Chapel and is one of the most famous paintings, but it was also shrouded in scandal when the piece was first completed. In the painting, the artist depicts the second coming of Christ and God's final judgment on humanity. You see angels and saints in the painting, as well as the souls of people being dragged either to heaven or hell. It was a powerful artwork, but because the painting featured mostly men who were drawn as nude, it made people pretty upset. This piece sparked a feud between Michelangelo and the Catholic Church, as they believed that the painting was too inappropriate for a place as sacred as the Sistine Chapel, and they were not happy with the artist's depiction of nude figures in that holy place. It wasn't until after Michelangelo passed away that the church got to tweak the painting to their liking, so they hired another artist to come and paint loincloths and fig leaves over the genitalia of the figures in the piece. At number 7, Death of the Virgin. Back in the day, people took their religious paintings quite seriously, and so they wanted everything to be done right, otherwise it became a scandal. Well, scandal occurred with Caravaggio's painting, Death of a Virgin. This painting featured a depiction of the Virgin Mary with a very thin halo in a somber setting. This piece was commissioned from Caravaggio for a chapel in the Church of Santa Maria della Scala in Rome. And this artist was specifically chosen because he was known for how his paintings realistically depict human emotion. This painting did end up capturing the realism that the church was looking for, but they were still let down and got pretty upset about the final piece because it was very different than other religious pieces at the time. Usually when a saint was depicted in a painting, it would feature a choir of angels to give a sense of divinity to the piece, but Caravaggio didn't include this and stepped away from that style of painting. Unfortunately for the artist, the church rejected the piece, and some believe that their rejection could have come from the painting's realism or from the fact that a lady of the night was used to model for Mary in the piece. At number 6, The Gross Clinic. These days, medical-based content is pretty popular. Medical dramas and medical TikToks have a lot of fans, and many of them don't see any problem with the gore that comes with the content, but back in the 1800s, it was a lot for audiences to handle, and that's why the piece called The Gross Clinic by Thomas Eakins faced scandal. This art piece that was labeled as shocking at the time featured Dr. Samuel D. Gross overseeing a surgical operation while doing a lecture for medical students. This piece was pretty controversial at the time because of the gore, seeing the surgical procedure really happening, and with the blood in the image, but many other people saw this piece as a little unsettling because of how all of the people in the painting looked so calm while there was a literal surgery being performed right in front of them. The only person who looked to be showing any emotion in the piece was a woman in the foreground of the painting who looked pretty triggered at the sight in front of her. Back when this painting was first released, it was controversial as heck, but now in more modern times, it's renowned as an an homage to science and medicine. At number 5, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. Picasso was one of the most renowned artists of modern times. His style of painting became iconic and he revolutionized modern art, but as he was beginning to find fame in the art world, he also faced some scandals when it came to some of his art pieces. One piece that caused some uproar from audiences was the painting titled Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. This piece featured 5 nude women in a brothel and was done in his signature cubist style. This piece not only shocked audiences but other artists as well because of how unusual and mildly unsettling it looked. Some of the women depicted in the painting had regular faces, but 2 of them were painted to look as if they were wearing African masks. On top of that, it looked like the women were staring at the viewer, which just made audiences more freaked out by this piece. It was seen as too progressive in the art world for quite some time, but as the years went on, people came to appreciate its unusual style and nature. At number 4, Myra. This next painting I'm about to tell you about is pretty creepy, and it caused a scandal in the art world because of its context and the way it was created. This 1995 painting called Myra, created by Marcus Harvey, was based on the mugshot of serial killer Myra Hindley. Myra was a serial killer in the 60s who took the lives of a handful of children between the ages of 13 and 17. When Myra's original mugshot started gaining notoriety as it was circled around the world, the artist attempted to create a piece to show the quote, influence of photography over years of obsessive media replication, end quote. The painting looks like a newspaper printing of the mugshot, but upon closer inspection, you can see that the painting is made up of small handprints like those of a child. When it first debuted at the Sensation exhibit of young British artists at the Royal Academy of Art in London in 1997, it was one of the most important pieces at the show, but it was also seen as controversial among many artists. It was so hated by some that it was actually vandalized when 2 artists defaced the piece with ink and eggs. It was seen as controversial to the public because some believed that the painting was insensitive to the pain that the families of Myra's victims were dealing with. At number 3, Guernica. Back to Picasso, we have another one of his scandalous paintings. This next piece, titled Guernica, was considered one of Picasso's best works, but it was also one of his most controversial. This painting featured a lot of pain and suffering, specifically of animals and humans. It was pretty graphic, even with his signature cubic style. Picasso painted this piece in reaction to the bombing of Spain by the Germans in World War II. At the time, this piece was turning into war propaganda to oppose fascism, and the painting became a tie between politics and war. During the war, Spain was allied with the Germans, so this painting was controversial because it went against the government's position in the war, since it was condemning the bombing and loss of Spanish lives. After the war was over, however, the controversy surrounding the painting died down as it was no longer relevant. At number 2, the Holy Virgin Mary. This next piece of artwork is probably one of the strangest looking pieces on this list, but the controversy surrounding this painting was pretty juicy. The Holy Virgin Mary piece by Chris O'Feely debuted at the Sensations exhibit of young British artists at the Royal Academy of Art in 1996. It featured a black Virgin Mary in a blue cloak surrounded by images of female genitalia cut out from adult magazines and featured a bare breast made out of elephant dung. Yeah. The whole point of this piece was to highlight the stereotyping and sexualization of black women. Though it was a powerful piece, it was also subject to a lot of criticisms. Religious groups took great offense to the content of this piece and the sexual themes surrounding the Virgin Mary. On top of that, New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani said that the artwork was quote, sick and anti-Catholic, and threatened to pull funding from the museum if the painting was not immediately removed. Even protesters tried to ruin the painting with white paint and horse manure. And finally, at number 1, The Origin of the World. Now here's the spiciest painting of them all. Probably won't be able to show a photo of this one unless it is heavily censored, but I'm sure if you really want to see it, you can Google it. The painting titled The Origin of the World by Gustave Courbet has been shocking viewers for over 150 years. This painting features a naked woman with her lady bits front and center. It was peak realism painting, and it was actually never supposed to be public. The Origin of the World was originally a commission by a private buyer, but somehow the public got a look at the piece and it caused a scandal for just how racy it was. If you've seen the image, then you would know what I'm talking about. The painting marked peak realism and also served as almost an anatomical study. Let's just say that it was very detailed. No one was expecting that one.